A wealthy woman's dinner party unravels when her seemingly loyal maid reveals herself as the true heir to a fortune, orchestrating a cruel game of deception. As the maid's true identity comes to light, the woman's empire crumbles, exposing her as nothing more than a pawn in a much darker scheme. In a twist of fate, the maid and her powerful fiance leave the woman in ruins, reclaiming what was always rightfully theirs. But before we start, if you guys like this story, please comment below and subscribe to Story Store. Please hit the bell icon. Thank you. The sound of the crystal wine glasses shattering echoed through the marble halls. Meredith's hand trembled, still extended toward the shattered remnants at her feet, the sharp shards of glass a glaring contrast against the opulent setting. Her lips parted to speak, but those words she had been rehearsing for weeks, stuck in her throat. The air was thick with tension. Across the room, Eleanor stood with her back straight, her jaw clenched, eyes narrowed. The silence was suffocating, but Meredith broke it first. "Get out of my sight now," Meredith sneered, her voice cold and brittle as she addressed the woman standing in front of her. Eleanor, the maid, who had been serving her for years, was the only one in the room unaffected by the spectacle unfolding before her. Meredith's gaze flicked to the door where the guest of honor was due to arrive, none other than the famed billionaire Samuel Carlyle, who had agreed to attend her extravagant dinner party. She had carefully crafted this night, a flawless evening of power and prestige. Everything had to be perfect. And Eleanor? She was the one thing that stood between Meredith and the glittering world she craved. "You're fired," Meredith hissed, though her voice lacked the finality she had intended. Eleanor's lips quirked with the slightest hint of defiance. She had seen this before. Meredith was a woman who built her empire on the backs of others. Her wealth derived from manipulation and power. But tonight, things would be different. "I'm not the one who should leave," Eleanor said softly, her words barely above a whisper, but the calmness in her tone made them feel like daggers. "And you're mistaken if you think you hold all the cards, Meredith." Meredith's heart skipped a beat as she looked up at Eleanor, who met her gaze unflinchingly. What did she mean by that? There was no possible way Eleanor could know. But before Meredith could retort, the front door swung open, and the dinner guest she'd been waiting for made his grand entrance. Samuel Carlyle, tall and striking, with an air of both mystery and authority, walked in with a quiet confidence that made the room seem to shrink. The wealthiest man in the city, the man whose presence would elevate her status, was finally here. Meredith straightened her back, smoothing her dress. "Ah, Samuel, you've arrived. I'm so pleased to—" "Actually," Samuel interrupted, his gaze sliding past her to Eleanor. "I'm not staying for dinner, Meredith. I came for her." His voice was calm, almost indifferent, but the words sent a jolt through Meredith's body. "Eleanor, I've been searching for you for a long time." Meredith's face twisted in confusion. "Searching for her? What do you mean? She's just my maid." She laughed, a forced, nervous sound that echoed through the spacious room. But Samuel's expression didn't falter. "Not just a maid, Meredith. You really haven't figured it out, have you?" Eleanor's past was buried under layers of secrecy. She was born into the prestigious Ainsley family, known for their old money and vast fortune. Her father had been a brilliant investor, respected in elite circles. But betrayal lurked in the shadows. Key figures close to him conspired behind his back, leading to his downfall and the family's forced exile. The once grand estate was sold, and the Ainsleys faded from public view. Eleanor, though, was determined to rebuild what was lost. She worked in silence, taking on various low-profile jobs, observing the power dynamics from the inside. Her position as Meredith's maid had been the perfect cover. While others saw her as nothing more than a servant, Eleanor was calculating her every move, carefully biding her time to take back what was rightfully hers, and expose the lies of those who had built their wealth on the backs of others. Meredith had no idea who Eleanor truly was. When they first met years ago, Eleanor was just another servant in a smaller estate. But from the moment she saw Meredith flaunting her wealth and power, Eleanor knew she was more than capable of bringing her down. While Meredith boasted about her rise to the top, Eleanor kept quiet, watching from the sidelines, knowing that her path was one of quiet patience. The Ainsleys' fortune was never lost. It had been hidden, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Eleanor's decision to work for Meredith wasn't out of necessity. It was a strategic move. Meredith's connection to powerful men, especially Samuel Carlyle, was part of the plan. Samuel, once a childhood friend, had been her ally for years. Together, they were now set to reclaim the Ainsley legacy, and Meredith, with all her arrogance, was the perfect pawn. Meredith had crossed paths with Eleanor years ago, long before she ever hired her as a maid. At the time, Eleanor had been working at a smaller estate owned by a mutual acquaintance. Meredith, ever the social climber, had noticed the young woman's elegance, intelligence, and the quiet grace with which she carried herself. Eleanor was unlike the other servants, and Meredith found herself both intrigued and slightly envious. She could sense that Eleanor wasn't just an ordinary maid, but Meredith dismissed her thoughts, assuming she was merely a poor girl trying to survive in a world where wealth and power were everything. She underestimated her, just as she had underestimated everyone around her. Eleanor, though, had already seen through Meredith's carefully constructed persona. She had watched as Meredith leveraged her beauty and charm to manipulate powerful men like Samuel Carlyle, men she would soon turn against. The night of the dinner party was a culmination of years of planning. Meredith had no idea that Eleanor had orchestrated her every move, all leading to this moment. She was a pawn in a much larger game, one that Eleanor had been playing in the shadows all along. Samuel was no longer the man Meredith thought she could manipulate. He had fallen in love with Eleanor, the woman she had unknowingly overlooked. As the evening went on, Meredith's unease grew. The small signs, the subtle hints, had started to add up. Samuel's coldness towards her, his focused attention on Eleanor, Meredith began to question everything. The reality of her life, of her carefully constructed world, was crumbling before her eyes. The evening reached a boiling point as Samuel finally revealed the truth that had been festering beneath the surface for years. As the tension in the room mounted, he turned to Meredith with a cold, unwavering gaze. "Meredith, you've built your empire on lies, on manipulating people to suit your needs," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "You've used men like me for your gain, but the truth is, you were never in control." Meredith's heart hammered in her chest. Samuel wasn't just the wealthy billionaire she had always dreamed of impressing. He was the key to everything Eleanor had been planning. "Eleanor is the true heir," Samuel continued, his words striking Meredith like a physical blow. "Her family is one of the oldest, most powerful dynasties. You've been playing a game, and you didn't even realize it." Meredith's world shattered. She had been nothing more than a pawn in a game she never understood. In a quiet voice, Eleanor turned to Meredith one final time. "You built your life on others' misery, Meredith. You used people like me to fuel your ambition, and now you'll see what happens when the truth is finally revealed. I didn't come here to destroy you. I came here to show you who you really are." Meredith's knees buckled. She collapsed onto the floor, the weight of the moment crashing down on her. Her empire had crumbled, and there was no way to reclaim it. As Eleanor and Samuel walked out of the grand estate, Leaving Meredith in her broken state, they shared a quiet moment of victory. Eleanor had reclaimed her rightful place. She had outsmarted Meredith and shown the world that wealth was not simply about money. It was about power, respect, and understanding the true value of what one had. And for Meredith, the lessons were painful, but they would last her a lifetime. The woman who had once been at the top of the social ladder was now just another face in the crowd, forgotten by the world she had tried so desperately to control. The game was over,